As a quick overview, there are two R&D tax relief schemes. When we talk about R&D tax relief schemes, we're talking very much about the schemes that are available for revenue expenditure, for tax-deductible revenue expenditure. There are two schemes, as I say, one for SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises. This was the one that was introduced back in the year 2000, so it's been around for a few years now. And reasonably settled, but as you may be aware, there are changes in the offing. And the other scheme available for companies that are not SMEs, and therefore they are by default large companies. That scheme was introduced in 2002 and was revised and changed somewhat in 2013. I'll talk about the definition of an SME so we know what scheme the company will be in. I'll talk about the definition in a few minutes. And then for completeness, there is also a scheme known as R&D allowances, RDAs. That is available for capital expenditure as opposed to revenue expenditure. So that's a capital relief. And that's something that I'm not going to talk any more about in this session. As I mentioned, there are discussions being had and indeed draft legislation recently published that will look to merge the two R&D tax relief schemes, the SME scheme and the large scheme. That's just been published in draft, and we have to wait to see how that's going to go through. So how do we make a claim for R&D tax relief? Well, there are new rules just been introduced that require us to potentially pre-notify, to notify HMRC in advance of an intention to claim R&D. I'm not going to cover that in detail in this session. That's covered in other sessions. But if we need to make a pre-notification, then we need to do that by 6 months after the period end. And that notification is made on an online G form to HMRC. And broadly speaking, that requirement will be there for first-time claimants and those companies that have maybe had a few years where they haven't claimed, so they've not claimed in the previous 3 years. Pre-notifying is not the same as making a claim. If you have to pre-notify, you also still have to actually make a formal claim.